He kissed her. Not a polite brush of lips, but a deep, claiming possession that stole her breath and silenced the room. When he drew back, his voice rang clear across the hush. "It seems I must announce my betrothal to Miss Whitmore. I trust you will all wish us joy. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button now. Don't miss what happens next." Crystal chandeliers blazed above the Devonshire ballroom, casting 1,000 fractured lights across silk gowns and polished boots. In the center of the frozen crowd, Julian Harrow, Duke of Rutland, tall, dark-haired, impeccably severe in midnight blue, held Mississippi Clara Whitmore close, his hand firm at her waist, his storm-gray eyes locked on hers. Gasps rippled outward. Clara stared up at him in stunned disbelief, her cheeks burning beneath loosened auburn curls, her white gown trembling with the force of her heartbeat. The Devonshire ballroom was a glittering cage, and Clara Whitmore had long ago learned how to navigate its bars. 3 seasons earlier, in the spring of 1815, she had arrived in London like a shipwreck survivor washed ashore. 19 years old, auburn-haired, green-eyed, and carrying the weight of her family's disgrace in every careful smile. Her father, Sir Reginald Whitmore, had died in debtor's prison after a series of disastrous investments. Her mother had retreated to a modest cottage in Bath with what remained of her jointure. Her 2 elder sisters had married quietly and respectably, escaping the worst of the scandal. Clara had been left to face the ton alone. She had done so with weapons of her own, a sharp mind, a sharper tongue, and an absolute refusal to simper. Where other debutantes fluttered and cooed, Clara debated politics with gentlemen who expected only pretty agreement, quoted Byron when conversation turned to poetry, and declined dances with men whose chief recommendation was a fortune built on slavery or enclosure. Society had responded precisely as she intended, by declaring her unmarriageable. She had thought herself safe. For 3 years she had moved through ballrooms and drawing-rooms like a ghost, present, but never quite belonging. She attended the required events to appease her aunt, Lady Staverton, who had sponsored her season out of distant family obligation. She danced when she must, conversed when politeness demanded, and retreated to the card-room or the library whenever possible. Gentlemen admired her wit from a safe distance and then pursued more biddable prospects. Mothers warned their sons away from the blue-stocking with the unfortunate family history. Clara had believed herself armored. Until Viscount Langford. It had happened at Lady Ashton's country house party in Hertfordshire, a fortnight before the Devonshire ball. Clara had sought refuge in the library after dinner, craving silence after hours of forced pleasantries. She had been reading Shelley's new poem, the one that had caused such a stir, when the door opened and Langford entered. He was handsome in a dissipated way, golden hair, blue eyes, a smile that promised ruin and delivered it with enthusiasm. He had pursued her all season with lazy persistence, undeterred by her refusals. Finding her alone, he had clearly decided the time was ripe. Clara had risen immediately, book clutched like a shield. "Lord Langford, I was just leaving. No need to run off on my account." He closed the door behind him with deliberate care. "I've been hoping for a private word. I have nothing private to say to you. Pity." He moved closer. "I've been thinking we might suit rather well. You're wasted on all this intellectual pretense. A woman like you needs a man who can. I need you to leave." He laughed. "Come now, Clara. May I call you Clara? We're quite alone. No need for maidenly outrage." She had tried to pass him, but he caught her arm. His grip was not bruising, but it was firm, possessive. "Let go of me. Or what? You'll quote Locke at me?" His breath was sour with wine. "You're ruined anyway, darling. Everyone knows your father died in disgrace. Why not enjoy yourself a little?" She wrenched free and fled, heart pounding, book abandoned on the table. Lady Ashton had found them moments later, Clara dishevelled, Langford smirking, and drawn her own conclusions. By morning, the house party buzzed with the story. Miss Whitmore caught in a compromising position with Viscount Langford. Details varied. Some said they were embracing, others that her gown was undone, but the essence remained: Clara Whitmore was no longer respectable. She had returned to London in disgrace, facing her aunt's tears and her mother's summoned wrath from Bath. The invitations slowed to a trickle. Friends became distant. Gentlemen who had once sought her conversation now avoided her eye. And Langford spread the tale with gleeful malice, embellishing details with each retelling until Clara barely recognized her own actions. She had become precisely what she had tried to avoid, a scandal. Now, at the Devonshire ball, the last great crush of the season, she stood among the potted palms near the terrace doors, watching the tun swirl around her like bright fish in a poisonous aquarium. Her gown was white, as befitted an unmarried lady, but 3 seasons old and remade twice. Her auburn hair was pinned severely, not a curl allowed to escape. She had come only because her aunt insisted one final appearance might salvage something. Clara knew better. Across the room, she caught sight of the Duke of Rutland. Julian Harrow was everything society admired and feared. Tall, dark, impeccably dressed, with a face carved from granite and eyes the cold grey of winter seas. He moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, acknowledged, admired, but never truly touched. Widowed young, he had retreated behind walls of perfect propriety, earning the nickname the Ice Duke for his refusal to remarry or even flirt. Clara had observed him from afar for years. He was the one man whose intellect matched her own, whose rare conversations at musical evenings or political dinners had left her stimulated rather than bored. She had watched him dance with suitable debutantes, converse with dowagers, and always retreat before any real connection could form. She had thought him safe to admire from a distance. Now, as whispers followed her like smoke, she found herself watching him again. He stood near the card-room, champagne untouched in his hand, observing the room with detached interest. When his gaze passed over her corner, she felt it like a physical touch, brief, assessing, and then gone. She looked away, heart aching with a loneliness she had not allowed herself to feel before. The evening wore on. Her aunt pressed eligible gentlemen upon her, widowers, second sons, men desperate enough to overlook scandal for a pretty face and modest dowry. Clara danced when she must, smiled when required, and felt her soul shrinking with every step. Until Langford appeared. He materialized at her elbow during a country dance, his golden hair gleaming, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Miss Whitmore, you're looking well. Quite recovered from our little adventure, I see." She stopped mid-step, earning a startled glance from her partner. "Lord Langford, may I have this dance? I am engaged. Your partner appears to have abandoned you." He gestured to the gentleman who had indeed retreated in confusion. "Come, one dance. For old times' sake." "There are no old times." His smile widened. "There could have been. There still could be. I'm not unreasonable, Clara. A private arrangement. I would sooner die. Careful. Pride goes before a fall, and you've already fallen rather far." He leaned closer. "No one believes your version of events. Why fight it? Accept what you are, and I might still be persuaded to." She turned to flee and walked straight into a wall of midnight blue superfine. Strong hands caught her elbows to steady her. "Miss Whitmore," the Duke of Rutland said, his voice cool and precise, "I believe this is our dance." Langford's smile faltered. "Your Grace." Rutland's grey eyes flicked to him with the force of a glacier. Lord Langford, I suggest you find another partner." The Viscount hesitated, then bowed stiffly and retreated. Clara found herself staring up at the Duke, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Thank you," she managed. He did not release her immediately. "Are you all right?" "I am managing." His gaze searched her face, and for a moment the marble mask slipped. She saw something that might have been anger or concern, or both. "You should not have to manage," he said quietly. Before she could respond, Langford's voice rose nearby, loud enough to carry. "The Whitmore girl. Desperate for any man who'll have her now. Though I suppose even desperation has limits." Laughter followed. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Rutland's grip tightened fractionally. "Stay here," he said. He moved with predatory grace toward the group where Langford held court. Clara watched, frozen, as the Duke confronted the Viscount. And then, impossibly, incredibly, he returned to her side, took her in his arms, and kissed her in front of the entire ton. The world narrowed to the pressure of his mouth, the strength of his arms, the scandal exploding around them like fireworks. When he drew back, his voice rang clear across the hush. "It seems I must announce my betrothal to Miss Whitmore. I trust you will all wish us joy." The ballroom erupted, and Clara Whitmore, ruined, sharp-tongued, unmarriageable Clara Whitmore, found herself engaged to the Ice Duke himself. She stared up at him in stunned disbelief, her cheeks burning, her heart racing, her carefully constructed world in ruins around her. And somewhere beneath the shock and fear, a tiny, treacherous spark of hope flickered to life. The kiss had not felt like duty. It had felt like claiming. The morning after Lady Ashton's house party, Clara woke to the sound of rain against the windows and the certain knowledge that her life in London was over. She had fled Hertfordshire at first light, claiming a sudden headache, leaving behind her abandoned book and any lingering illusion of safety. The journey back to town had been a blur of jolting wheels and relentless dread. By the time her aunt's carriage deposited her at the Staverton townhouse in Mount Street, the roomers were already waiting. Her aunt, Lady Staverton, a thin, anxious woman whose chief talent was detecting social catastrophe at 50 paces, met her in the hall with a face like parchment left too near a flame. "Clara, thank God you are here. The most dreadful—" She stopped, wringing her hands. "Come into the morning-room. We cannot speak in the hall." The morning-room smelled of damp wool and desperation. A single letter lay on the salver, thick cream paper sealed with Langford's crest. Clara did not need to open it. She knew what it would say. Lady Staverton paced while Clara read. Langford's note was brief, almost courteous. He expressed regret that their private interlude had been interrupted, assured her that his intentions were honorable, and suggested a meeting to discuss their future. The implication was clear: accept his protection, public or private, or face the consequences of refusal. Clara crumpled the paper in her fist. "He lies," she said quietly. "Nothing happened." Her aunt's eyes filled with tears. "I believe you, child. Of course I do. But Lady Ashton saw you leaving the library together. Langford has been indiscreet. The story is everywhere." Clara closed her eyes. Everywhere. Already. The next weeks were a slow drowning. Invitations ceased. Morning callers left cards but did not stay. Friends who had once sought her conversation now crossed the street to avoid greeting her. At the few events her aunt insisted they attend, out of a desperate belief that absence would confirm guilt, Clara felt the weight of 100 staring eyes. She bore it with outward calm, chin high, responses measured. Inside, she was breaking. And through it all, she watched for the Duke of Rutland. She told herself it was mere curiosity. Julian Harrow had always fascinated her from a distance, the one man in London whose mind seemed to match her own, whose rare comments at literary evenings or political salons had left her thinking for days. He was everything society prized: wealthy, powerful, impeccably connected. And everything it feared: cold, controlled, untouchable. She had seen him perhaps a dozen times in 3 seasons. He had bowed when introduced, exchanged polite words about books or parliamentary reform, and then retreated behind his marble facade. She had thought him safe, too aloof to notice a sharp-tongued blue-stocking with tarnished prospects. Now, in her ruin, she found herself scanning every ballroom for his tall figure, his dark hair touched with premature silver, his storm-gray eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. He never approached her. But she felt his gaze sometimes, brief and assessing, before it slid away. The Devonshire ball was meant to be her last stand. Lady Staverton had insisted. One final appearance. We cannot let them think we are hiding. If we behave as though nothing is amiss, perhaps the rumors would die. Perhaps Langford would tire of the game. Perhaps society would forget. Clara knew better, but she went anyway. She wore her best gown, white silk remade from 2 seasons past, with delicate embroidery at the hem that she had worked herself during long evenings alone. Her auburn hair was pinned severely, not a curl allowed to soften the line. She looked, she hoped, like a woman who had nothing to hide. The ballroom was a crush. The Duke and Duchess of Devonshire had outdone themselves. Chandeliers blazing, orchestras at both ends, banks of hothouse flowers perfuming the air. The ton turned out in force, eager for the final spectacle of the season. Clara stood near the entrance with her aunt, greeting acquaintances who offered tepid smiles and swift excuses. She felt Langford's presence before she saw him, a prickle at the back of her neck, the way animals sense a predator. He appeared at her elbow during the first set, golden and smiling, wineglass in hand. "Miss Whitmore, you grow more beautiful with every scandal." Her aunt gasped. Clara met his eyes steadily. "Lord Langford, may I have this dance?" "No." His smile did not waver. "Come now. We should present a united front. People are talking. Let them talk. They are saying far worse things than talk." He leaned closer. "I could stop it, you know. A word from me. I would sooner dance with the devil. Careful. Some might say you already have." He retreated with a bow, but Clara saw the calculation in his eyes. He was planning something. The evening dragged. Clara danced with a harmless baronet who smelled of macassar oil, endured her aunt's increasingly desperate introductions to elderly widowers, and felt the whispers coalesce around her like thickening fog. Until Langford struck. He waited until the interval between sets, when the crowd was densest. Clara was returning from the refreshment table when he materialized again, blocking her path. "Miss Whitmore, a word. I have nothing to say to you, but I have plenty to say to you." His voice carried, deliberately, she realized. Heads turned. "About our little adventure in Hertfordshire. I had thought to be discreet, but since you persist in denying, there was no adventure." "Really?" He raised his voice further. "Then why were you leaving the library with your hair tumbling down and your cheeks flushed? Why did Lady Ashton find us together?" Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Because you followed me in uninvited and would not leave. That is not how I remember it." His smile was vicious. "I remember a lady who was rather more accommodating." Gasps rippled outward. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "You are lying." "Am I? Then perhaps we should demonstrate." He reached for her arm. And that was when the Duke of Rutland appeared. He moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, tall and dark and implacable. Langford's hand froze mid-reach. "Your Grace," Langford began. Rutland ignored him. His gray eyes fixed on Clara with an intensity that stole her breath. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice cutting through the hush. "I believe this is our dance." It was not. They had never danced. They had barely spoken. But Clara placed her hand in his without hesitation. He drew her into his arms as the orchestra struck up a waltz, and the crowd parted around them like water around a stone. They moved together in perfect silence for a dozen measures. Clara was aware of every point of contact, his hand at her waist, warm through layers of silk, his other hand clasping hers, the subtle spice of his cologne. She was aware, too, of the hundreds of eyes watching them. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible. He did not pretend to misunderstand. "Because Langford is a liar," he said quietly. "And because I could not stand by and watch him destroy you." She looked up at him, searching his marble features for some crack, some hint of what this cost him. "You do not know me. I know enough." His grip tightened fractionally. "I know your father was a man of honor. I know you are intelligent and brave and far too good for the vipers in this room." Her throat tightened. The waltz had barely begun when Clara felt the full weight of the ballroom settle upon her. Julian Harrow's hand rested at her waist with perfect propriety, yet the touch burned through silk and stays. His other hand clasped hers lightly, guiding her through the steps with effortless authority. They moved as though they had danced together 100 times, his lead firm, her response instinctive. Around them, the ton watched in frozen fascination. Clara's mind raced. She had accepted his rescue without thought, desperate to escape Langford's venom. Now she found herself in the arms of the most powerful man in the room, the one man whose notice she had both craved and feared. His gray eyes never left her face. "You are trembling," he observed quietly. "Am I?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Perhaps I am merely surprised to find myself dancing with the Duke of Rutland." A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his features. "I am equally surprised to find myself dancing with you." They turned beneath the chandeliers, light fracturing across his severe profile. "Why did you intervene?" she asked. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because Langford is a liar and a coward. Because your father was a man I respected. Because—" He stopped as though the words cost him. "Because I could not watch him destroy you." The music swelled around them. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "You do not know me well enough to risk your consequence for my sake." "I know enough." His voice was low, meant only for her. "I know you are intelligent and brave. I know you have borne this season's cruelty with more dignity than most would manage. I know Langford's lies are poison, and I will not stand idly by while they spread." She searched his face for mockery and found none. Across the room, Langford watched them with narrowed eyes, his golden smile gone brittle. He had gathered a small court of young bucks and disaffected debutantes, all eager for fresh scandal. Clara saw him lean in to speak to Lord Westbrook, saw the laughter that followed. The waltz ended. Julian did not release her immediately. Instead, he guided her toward the edge of the floor, his hand still at her waist. "Stay close," he murmured. "This is not over." Langford struck moments later. The orchestra had paused between sets. The crowd milled, refreshing glasses, exchanging gossip. Langford positioned himself near the center of the room, voice pitched to carry. "I say, Westbrook," he called, loud enough for dozens to hear. "Have you noticed how desperately some ladies cling to any gentleman who will dance with them? One might almost think they fear being left on the shelf." Laughter rippled. Clara felt Julian tense beside her. Langford continued, eyes fixed on them. "Though I suppose desperation has its reasons. When a lady's reputation is already compromised, she must grasp at whatever straws present themselves, even the most unlikely ones. More laughter, sharper now. Clara's cheeks burned. Julian's hand tightened on her arm. "Steady," he said under his breath. Langford raised his glass in mock toast. "To unlikely alliances. May they bring joy to all concerned, though I fear some parties may find the arrangement rather inconvenient." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Clara felt the crowd's attention shift, felt the weight of judgment settle upon her shoulders. She lifted her chin. Julian moved. He released her arm and stepped forward, his presence cutting through the room like a blade. "Lord Langford." The laughter died. Julian's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the ballroom. "You have spoken freely about Miss Whitmore's reputation this evening. I suggest you stop." Langford's smile did not waver. "Your Grace, I merely relate events as they occurred. If Miss Whitmore objects to the truth, there is no truth to your tale." The room went deathly still. Julian continued, his tone conversational, as though discussing the weather. "Miss Whitmore sought solitude in a library. You followed her uninvited. She rejected your advances and fled. Lady Ashton interrupted what was, at best, an unwelcome intrusion. That is the entirety of the matter." Langford's face flushed. "And you know this how, Rutland? Were you there?" "I know it because Miss Whitmore is incapable of the behavior you describe, and because you, Langford, are incapable of truth when a lie serves your vanity better." Gasps echoed. Langford set down his glass with deliberate care. Strong words from a man who has shown no interest in the lady until tonight. "One might wonder at your sudden protectiveness." Julian's expression did not change. "One might. But one would be wiser to mind one's own affairs." Langford stepped closer, voice dropping to a venomous hiss that still carried. "Careful, Your Grace. Defending ruined goods can tarnish even the most exalted reputation. People might begin to speculate about your motives." Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. Julian's gray eyes turned glacial. "My motives are simple. I despise liars, and I will not stand by while you destroy an innocent woman for sport." "Innocent?" Langford laughed. "Come now. We were alone together. He reached for Clara's arm. Julian moved faster. He caught Langford's wrist in an iron grip. "Remove your hand," he said softly, "or I will remove it for you." The room held its breath. Langford tried to pull free and failed. Julian released him with a shove that sent the Viscount stumbling. Then, before anyone could react, Julian turned to Clara. His hands came up to frame her face. And he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was possession and protection and raw, unfiltered claim. His mouth moved against hers with devastating certainty, stealing her breath, her thoughts, her equilibrium. She felt his fingers thread into her hair, felt the tremor in his touch that betrayed the control he exerted. The kiss lasted seconds or hours. She could not tell. When he drew back, the ballroom was utterly silent. Julian's voice rang clear across the hush. "It seems I must announce my betrothal to Miss Whitmore. I trust you will all wish us joy." The silence shattered. Gasps, exclamations, the rustle of silk as people pressed closer. Clara stared up at him, lips tingling, heart pounding so hard she feared it might burst. Langford's face was mottled with rage. "You cannot. I already have." Julian's arm came around Clara's waist, steady and unbreakable. "Miss Whitmore has done me the honor of accepting my hand. Any further speculation about her character will be taken as a personal insult. The Duchess of Devonshire appeared as if by magic, her expression a fascinating blend of shock and delight. "Your Grace, Miss Whitmore, this is most unexpected, most gratifying. You must allow me to be the first to offer congratulations." The dam broke. Suddenly they were surrounded, dowagers offering felicitations, gentlemen bowing, debutantes staring with wide-eyed envy. Clara moved through it in a daze, Julian's hand warm at her back, his presence a shield against the chaos he had created. Only when they reached the relative privacy of the terrace doors did he release her. She turned to him, searching his face for answers. "What have you done?" His marble composure had returned, but his eyes were stormy. "What was necessary?" "Necessary?" Her voice cracked. "You have ruined yourself to save me. I have done no such thing. You have announced our betrothal to the entire ton without speaking to me, without settlements, without— I will speak to your brother tomorrow." "That is not the point." He caught her hands, his grip firm. "The point is that Langford will never touch you again. The point is that society will accept you as Duchess of Rutland or answer to me. The point—" his voice roughened. "The point is that I could not watch him break you." Clara stared at him, tears threatening. "Why?" For a long moment he was silent. Then, quietly, "Because you deserve better." He released her hands and stepped back, the mask settling fully into place. "I will call tomorrow to make arrangements. Until then, Miss Whitmore." He bowed, precise, perfect, and walked away. Clara remained on the terrace, the cool night air raising gooseflesh on her arms. The Ice Duke had melted, spectacularly and publicly. And she, ruined, sharp-tongued Clara Whitmore, was now betrothed to him. She did not know whether to laugh, cry, or run. She suspected she would soon be doing all three. The rain that had threatened all week finally arrived in the night, drumming against the windows of the Staverton townhouse like impatient fingers. Clara woke to grey light and the certain knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes she felt Julian Harrow's mouth on hers, firm, deliberate, devastating. She heard his voice ringing across the ballroom, calm and absolute, my betrothal to Miss Whitmore. The ton would be in an uproar. By now, every drawing-room in Mayfair would be dissecting the Ice Duke's extraordinary declaration. Speculation would run wild. Had he been secretly courting her? Was she carrying his child? Had Langford's lies driven him to a desperate act of chivalry? Clara pressed her fingers to her lips, still swollen from the kiss, and felt heat flood her cheeks. A knock sounded, sharp, urgent. "Miss Clara." Her maid, Betsy, burst in without waiting for permission, eyes wide. "The house is in an uproar. Lady Staverton says you're to come down at once. The Duke of Rutland is here." Clara's heart stuttered. "Already? He arrived not 10 minutes ago. Sent his card up with a footman and asked to speak with you privately. Well, as privately as Lady Staverton will allow. She's in a state, miss." Half thrilled, half terrified. Clara rose on unsteady legs. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. Auburn hair tumbling loose from its nighttime braid, green eyes too bright, cheeks flushed with sleeplessness and something that felt dangerously like anticipation. She dressed quickly in a simple morning gown of soft green muslin, her best remaining unworn dress, and pinned her hair with trembling fingers. There was no time for elaborate coiffure. The Duke of Rutland was waiting. Downstairs, the morning-room felt smaller than usual, the air thick with tension. Lady Staverton paced before the fireplace, wringing her hands. Julian stood by the window, tall and immaculate in dark blue superfine, raindrops still clinging to his broad shoulders. He turned as Clara entered, and for a moment the room held only the sound of the rain. "Miss Whitmore." His bow was precise. "Your Grace." Lady Staverton fluttered forward. "I shall be just outside if you need me." Though propriety, well, after last night, she trailed off, clearly torn between scandalized delight and maternal duty. Julian inclined his head. "We will leave the door ajar, Lady Staverton." Her aunt retreated with one last meaningful glance at Clara. Be charming, be grateful, do not ruin this, and closed the door to precisely the width required by etiquette. Silence stretched. Julian broke it first. "I owe you an apology." Clara blinked. "An apology?" "For the manner of my announcement. It was irregular. Impulsive." His jaw tightened. "Unforgivable, perhaps. You saved me from Langford's lies. I created a far greater scandal in the process." His grey eyes searched her face. "I acted without thought for the consequences to you." "The consequences," Clara said slowly, "are that I am now betrothed to the Duke of Rutland. Many women would consider that a fortunate consequence." His expression did not soften. "Many women would consider it a gilded cage." She moved closer, drawn despite herself. "And you? What do you consider it?" He was silent for a long moment. "A necessity," he said finally, "and a complication I did not anticipate." Clara felt her heart sink. "I see." "No," he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You do not see. When I kissed you—" He stopped, as though the words were difficult. "I intended only to silence Langford, to stake a public claim that would force society to accept you under my protection." A territorial gesture. His mouth twisted. "Precisely. Cold. Calculated. Effective." He met her eyes. "But when I actually kissed you, it was not calculated at all. It was—" he searched for the word. "Unexpected." Clara's pulse raced. "Unexpected how?" He reached out, slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she did not, his fingers brushed a loose curl from her cheek. "I have spent years perfecting control," he said quietly. "Years convincing myself that emotion was dangerous. That attachment led only to pain. And in one moment, one impulsive, indefensible moment, I risked everything I had built. For me. For you." The admission hung between them. Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "Why?" He withdrew his hand, but his gaze remained steady. "Because Langford's lies were intolerable. Because your courage in facing them was admirable. Because—" his voice roughened. "Because I have watched you for 3 seasons, Miss Whitmore. Watched you challenge fools with wit instead of flattery. Watched you read books no debutante should admit to understanding. Watched you bear society's cruelty with a dignity that shamed them all." She stared at him, astonished. "You noticed me?" "I noticed everything about you." A faint, self-deprecating smile touched his mouth, the first she had ever seen from him. "I told myself it was mere observation, intellectual curiosity. But last night, when Langford threatened to destroy you, I realized it was more than that. Much more." Clara's throat tightened. "And now we are betrothed." He straightened, the marble mask settling back into place. "And we must decide how to proceed." She found her voice. "Proceed how?" "I propose a marriage of convenience." His tone was brisk now, practical. "In public, We will present the appearance of a devoted couple. In private, we will maintain separate lives. I will not interfere with your interests, your reading, your political discussions, whatever pursuits bring you satisfaction. You will have the full protection of my name and consequence. In return, I ask only discretion and the continuation of familial duties when required." Clara felt something inside her fracture. A convenient marriage. It is the most rational course. Rational. She tasted the word. And what of passion? Of affection? Of the kiss that was, by your own admission, unexpected? His grey eyes darkened. Passion is dangerous. Affection leads to vulnerability. I am offering you what I can. What you can, she repeated softly. Not what you wish. He turned away, moving to the window where rain streaked the glass. I do not trust wishes, he said to the storm outside. I have learned that they lead to loss. Clara studied his rigid back, the tension in his broad shoulders. Tell me about the loss. He was silent so long she thought he would not answer. Then, my parents died when I was 16. A carriage accident. My mother was, his voice caught, almost imperceptibly. She was everything warm in my world. After she was gone, I learned that warmth could be taken away in an instant. That love was a liability. He turned back to face her. I have spent 15 years ensuring nothing can hurt me like that again. Clara's heart ached for the boy he had been. And yet you kissed me last night. And yet I kissed you. His gaze was steady. Which is why I am offering the only arrangement I believe I can sustain. One based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. She moved closer, close enough to see the faint shadows beneath his eyes. And if I want more than boundaries? His breath hitched. Then I fear I will disappoint you. Clara reached out and laid her hand against his cheek. He did not pull away. I do not believe you will, she said quietly. I believe you are capable of far more than you allow yourself to feel. His hand came up to cover hers, warm and strong. You are braver than I am, Clara Whitmore. Perhaps. She smiled, though tears threatened. Or perhaps I have simply less to lose. He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there that sent shivers down her spine. Then we are agreed, he said against her skin. A marriage of convenience. With the possibility, his voice roughened, with the possibility of more, if we prove capable. Clara felt hope flare, fragile but bright. I accept your terms, your grace. Julian, he corrected softly. If we are to be married, you should call me Julian. Julian. The name felt intimate on her tongue. He smiled then, a real smile, small but genuine, and the marble cracked just a little further. I will speak with your brother this afternoon about settlements. The wedding can take place in 3 weeks, enough time for the banns, not enough for gossip to fester. 3 weeks. It seemed impossibly soon. Is that acceptable? She thought of Langford's lies, of society's judgment, of the warmth of Julian's hand against her cheek. It is acceptable. He lifted her hand to his lips, grey eyes never leaving hers. Then we are betrothed, Clara. Truly this time. Outside, the rain began to ease, a weak sun struggling through the clouds. Inside, 2 people who had both learned to protect their hearts stood on the precipice of something neither had expected. Clara did not know if Julian would ever fully lower his walls. But she knew, with sudden fierce certainty, that she would spend whatever time they had trying to help him. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would do the same for her. The 3 weeks of their engagement passed in a carefully choreographed whirlwind. London society, having recovered from the initial shock of the Ice Duke's dramatic announcement, now watched the couple with avid fascination. Every public appearance was dissected, every gesture analyzed for proof of either genuine attachment or desperate damage control. Julian excelled at the performance. He called daily at the Staverton townhouse, bearing flowers or books he thought Clara might enjoy. Byron's latest, a new treatise on political economy, once a slim volume of Mary Wollstonecraft's letters that made her aunt faint with horror. He escorted her to the theatre, to musicales, to the few balls still held in the waning season. He danced with her twice at each assembly, never more, never less, held her chair, fetched her lemonade, and looked at her across crowded rooms with an expression of quiet possession that set dowagers sighing and debutantes seething. In public they were perfect. In private, he was courteous, attentive, and utterly remote. He never kissed her again. Not on the cheek in greeting, not on the hand in parting. He maintained a distance of inches that felt like miles, his conversation polished and impersonal. He discussed settlements with her brother, wedding plans with her aunt, the weather with Clara herself. He asked after her reading, her health, her preferences in everything from carriage horses to china patterns. He never asked after her heart. Clara told herself it was what she had agreed to. A marriage of convenience. Clear boundaries. Mutual respect. She told herself she was content. She lied. The first real test came at Lady Sefton's ball, one of the last great crushes before Christmas. Clara dressed with particular care, a gown of deep sapphire silk that brought out the green of her eyes, her auburn hair swept up with pearl pins. The Rutland sapphires, Julian's betrothal gift, gleamed at her throat and ears, marking her unmistakably as his. She felt beautiful. She felt like an impostor. Julian collected her in his crested carriage, his gaze lingering on her appearance with what might have been appreciation. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, exactly. It was careful. At the Sefton mansion, they entered together to a rustle of interest. Heads turned. Whispers followed. The Duke of Rutland and his scandalous betrothed. Julian's hand rested lightly at her waist as they greeted their hostess. "Lady Sefton, thank you for receiving us." "Your Grace." "Miss Whitmore." Lady Sefton's smile was genuine, if curious. "We are honored. The ton has been quite agog since your announcement." Julian's expression did not change. "We are delighted to provide entertainment." Lady Sefton laughed. "You provide rather more than that. Half the debutantes are in mourning, and the other half are plotting how to steal you away." Clara felt Julian's fingers tighten fractionally. "I assure you, Lady Sefton, there is no danger of that." They moved into the ballroom, and Clara felt the weight of every gaze. Julian stayed close, guiding her through introductions, deflecting questions with cool precision. He danced the first set with her, a waltz that drew every eye. They moved together flawlessly, his lead sure, her steps matching his without thought. "You dance well," he observed. "As do you. I had an excellent teacher." She wanted to ask who, wanted to know more about the boy he had been before grief turned him to marble. Instead she smiled politely and let the music carry them. After the waltz, he fetched her champagne and introduced her to his aunt, Lady Margaret Harrow, a formidable woman with Julian's grey eyes and a kind smile. "So you are the young lady who finally cracked my nephew's ice," Lady Margaret said bluntly. Clara flushed. "I believe the ice remains largely intact, my lady." Lady Margaret laughed. "We shall see." The evening progressed smoothly until the arrival of Lady Arabella Vaughan. She entered like a comet, golden hair, sapphire eyes, gown of shimmering gold that caught every light. Daughter of the Earl of Harrington, heiress to a vast fortune, and widely considered the most beautiful woman of the season. She had been abroad during the scandal and Clara's subsequent engagement, and her return was clearly anticipated. Julian tensed beside Clara. "Lady Arabella," he said quietly. My cousin's daughter. Clara felt a pang she refused to name. She is very beautiful. She is. Arabella spotted them and made her way over, trailed by admirers. Julian. She held out both hands, obliging him to take them. I have only just returned from Paris and heard the most extraordinary news. You are betrothed. I am. Arabella's sapphire gaze turned to Clara, assessing. To Miss Whitmore. How unexpected. Julian's voice was cool. Miss Whitmore is everything I could wish for in a wife. Arabella's smile did not reach her eyes. I am sure. Though I confess I am surprised. You always said you would never marry unless— She stopped, as though remembering her audience. Well, I wish you both very happy. She moved on, but the damage was done. Clara felt every eye in the room upon them, felt the speculation renew. Julian's hand tightened on her arm. I apologize. For what? For Arabella's rudeness. It was hardly rude, merely honest. He guided her toward a quieter corner. She implied I had compromised my own standards. She implied you had compromised yours. Julian's jaw tightened. My standards are precisely where I wish them to be. Clara looked up at him. Are they? For a moment the mask slipped. I do not know, he said quietly. I only know that since that night at Devonshire House, nothing has been as I expected. Her heart raced. In what way? He opened his mouth to answer, and Lady Sefton appeared, requesting Julian's presence for a matter of precedence. The moment shattered. Julian bowed apologetically and left her with a group of matrons who immediately began probing for details of the wedding. Clara endured it with practiced smiles, but inside she was reeling. Nothing has been as I expected. The words echoed through the rest of the evening. Julian returned eventually, but the intimacy of the moment was gone. He was courteous, attentive, perfect, and distant. When he returned her to the Staverton townhouse, he helped her from the carriage with the same careful touch he had shown all evening. I will call tomorrow, he said. I look forward to it. He hesitated. Clara. She waited. Good night. He bowed and left. Clara watched his carriage disappear into the night, feeling the familiar ache settle in her chest. 3 weeks of perfect public devotion. 3 weeks of private distance. And one moment, one fleeting moment, when he had almost admitted that she had changed everything. She did not sleep that night. She lay awake thinking of grey eyes and careful words and the way his hand had trembled just slightly when he touched her face in the morning-room. She thought of Lady Arabella's golden beauty and Julian's tension at her arrival. She thought of the convenient marriage he had proposed and the unexpected kiss that had started it all. And she wondered, with a hope she could no longer suppress, whether the ice-duke might be melting after all. Whether he might, against all his careful plans and fears, be falling in love with her. The thought was terrifying. It was also impossible to resist. The strain of maintaining perfect propriety began to tell. Clara felt it in small things, the way her smiles grew brittle at yet another evening of speculation disguised as congratulations, the ache behind her eyes from sleepless nights spent wondering what Julian truly felt, the quiet dread that built with every perfectly courteous conversation that never quite crossed into intimacy. Julian felt it too, though he hid it better. She saw it in the tension around his eyes when Arabella Vaughan appeared at events, always beautiful, always charming, always casting lingering glances at the Duke that society noticed and whispered about. She saw it in the way he retreated further behind his walls after each encounter, his conversation growing more formal, his touch more careful. The breaking point came at the Harrington ball, hosted by Arabella's father. The mansion was ablaze with light, the ballroom larger and grander than even Devonshire House. Clara entered on Julian's arm, wearing the Rutland diamonds and a gown of deep crimson that made her auburn hair glow like fire. She felt beautiful, confident, almost happy, until Arabella found them. She appeared at Julian's elbow during the first interval, golden and radiant in pale blue silk. "Julian, darling, you promised me a dance last season and never delivered. You cannot deny me now that I am returned." Julian's expression remained impassive. "Lady Arabella, I believe my dances are spoken for." "All of them?" Her smile was dazzling. "Surely you can spare one for an old friend." Clara felt Julian's arm tense beneath her hand. "I am afraid not." Arabella's gaze slid to Clara, cool and assessing. "Miss Whitmore, how protective he has become. One might almost think he fears leaving you alone." Clara met her eyes steadily. "One might think many things, Lady Arabella. Most of them incorrect." Arabella laughed, a tinkling sound that drew attention. How refreshing to hear the famous Whitmore wit in action. "Though I wonder," she leaned closer, voice dropping, "I wonder if the Duke finds it quite so charming in private." Julian's voice was ice. "That is enough." "Is it?" Arabella's smile never wavered. "We have known each other since childhood, Julian. I know what you truly value. Intelligence, yes. Beauty, certainly. But also suitability. Connection. A shared understanding of what it means to bear a great name." She turned back to Clara. Things a woman of modest circumstances might struggle to comprehend. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Julian stepped forward, placing himself between them. "You will apologize to my betrothed." "Will I?" Arabella's eyes widened in mock innocence. "For speaking the truth?" "Everyone is thinking it, Julian. They simply lack the courage to say it. You, the most eligible man in England, throwing yourself away on a compromised bluestocking because of one impulsive moment. How long before you regret it?" The whispers around them grew louder. Clara felt every eye upon her, felt the old shame rise like bile. Julian's voice was deadly quiet. "I will never regret protecting the woman He stopped, jaw clenching. "The woman who will be my wife." Arabella's smile turned pitying. "Protecting." "Yes, that is what this is." She swept away, leaving devastation in her wake. Julian turned to Clara, his face pale. "I apologize. She had no right." But Clara was already moving, slipping through the crowd toward the terrace doors. She needed air. She needed escape. She found herself in a small antechamber off the ballroom, dimly lit and mercifully empty. She pressed her back to the wall and closed her eyes, fighting tears. Arabella's words echoed, "Throwing yourself away. How long before you regret it?" The door opened. Julian entered, closing it behind him. "Clara." She opened her eyes. "Please leave me alone." "I will not." He crossed the room in 3 strides. Arabella was cruel and wrong. "You must not." "Must not what?" Her voice broke. "Must not recognize the truth?" She said nothing the entire ton is not thinking. "You acted on impulse to save me from Langford, and now you are trapped with a woman you never would have chosen otherwise." "I chose you. You chose to kiss me. There is a difference." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Clara, do you deny it?" Tears spilled over. "Do you deny that without that moment of madness you would never have looked twice at me? That Arabella Vaughan is exactly the sort of woman you should marry. Beautiful, suitable, connected." His silence was answer enough. Clara laughed, a broken sound. I thought I could do this. I thought I could accept a convenient marriage, maintain boundaries, be content with respect and protection. But I cannot. She dashed tears from her cheeks. I have fallen in love with you, Julian. Hopelessly, stupidly in love with the man behind the marble. With the man who notices what books I read and brings me Wollstonecraft and debates parliamentary reform with genuine interest. With the man who defends me when no one else will. She drew a shaking breath. And I cannot bear another day of watching you retreat behind your walls, knowing you regret the impulse that bound us together. Julian's face was ashen. I do not regret it. You do not want it either. Her voice was barely a whisper. You want safety, control, a marriage where nothing can hurt you. He moved closer, hands clenched at his sides. You think I feel nothing? I think you feel too much and are terrified of it. He stopped inches from her. You are right. His voice was raw. I am terrified. I have been terrified since the moment I kissed you and realized I wanted more than a convenient arrangement. Clara's heart stuttered. What? I wanted you. The words tore from him. Not duty. Not protection. You. Your mind. Your fire. The way you challenge me. The way you look at me like you see past the marble to whatever is left underneath. He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. I have spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself I could maintain boundaries, that I could keep you at arm's length and protect us both from what happened before. Before. He released one hand to touch her face, his fingers trembling. My parents' death was not the only loss. There was someone else. Years ago. I thought I loved her. His jaw worked. She laughed at the idea, called me cold, unfeeling, said no woman could truly want a man made of marble. Clara's throat tightened. And you believed her. I already believed it. His gray eyes were dark with old pain. After my mother died, I learned that love leads to loss. After her rejection, I learned that even when I tried to feel, I was incapable of inspiring it in return. He cupped her cheek. Until you. Clara felt tears slip down her face. I have been fighting this, he said roughly. Fighting how much I want you. How much I need you. Because if I let myself love you and lost you, you will not lose me. You cannot promise that. No. But I can promise that I will love you every day we have, whether it is 50 years or 50 days. He rested his forehead against hers. I am so afraid, he whispered. I know. She wrapped her arms around him. But you are not alone any more. For a long moment they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the ball muffled beyond the door. When he finally pulled back, his gray eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I have loved you since you called Langford a festering boil and looked at me like you expected me to agree. She laughed through her tears. I believe my exact words were repulsive excuse for a gentleman. Close enough. He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of everything he had been holding back. When they broke apart, both were trembling. I have been a fool, he said against her lips. We both have. No more walls. No more walls. He smiled, the real, rare smile that transformed his face. Then let us return to the ball and show them what a love match looks like. Clara took his arm, heart soaring. As they re-entered the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers followed. But this time, Clara did not care. She had the Duke's love. And that was worth every whisper in London. The storm arrived without warning on the eve of their wedding. Clara had spent the day at Rutland House, Julian's vast London residence, overseeing final preparations for their removal to the country estate after the ceremony. The house was in upheaval, servants packing trunks, arranging flowers, polishing silver for the wedding breakfast that would follow the quiet chapel service Julian had insisted upon. He had been attentive all day, his grey eyes following her with a warmth that still made her breath catch. Since the Harrington ball, the walls between them had thinned to gossamer. He touched her often, small, casual brushes of fingers, a hand at her waist, a kiss pressed to her temple when no one watched. He spoke to her of the future with a tentative hope that grew stronger daily. Plans for the estate, ideas for improvements, dreams of children who would run through gardens he had played in as a boy. Clara had begun to believe in it. Then the sky cracked open. It began as a summer squall, dark clouds rolling in from the west, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. By evening, it was a tempest, wind howling through the streets, rain lashing the windows in sheets, lightning illuminating the sky in violent flashes. Julian's townhouse was sturdy, but old. When the first leak appeared in the drawing-room ceiling, Clara laughed it off. When the second and third followed, servants scrambled with buckets. Julian found her in the library, directing footmen to move books to higher shelves as water dripped from a cracked pane. "You should be resting," he said, taking the heavy volume from her hands. "Tomorrow is our wedding day. Rest is impossible with the house flooding." He smiled, but his eyes were concerned. "The storm will pass." It did not. By midnight, the streets were rivers. Reports came of flooding in the lower parts of town, of carriages overturned, of people trapped in their homes. Julian paced, restless, sending servants to check on tenants in the Rutland properties nearby. Clara watched him, seeing the boy who had learned responsibility too young. "You cannot save everyone," she said softly. He stopped pacing. "I know." His voice was rough. "But I must try." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, tense, haunted. She crossed to him, taking his hands. "You are not alone anymore." Thunder rolled. For a moment he simply held her, his forehead against hers. Then a footman burst in, soaked and wide-eyed. "Your Grace." "The river. It's breached the embankment near the old warehouse. The lower floors are flooding. There are families trapped." Julian's expression hardened. "I must go. I am coming with you." No, his grip tightened. "It is too dangerous." "Which is precisely why you need someone who knows which families have children, which have elderly who cannot move quickly." She met his eyes steadily. "You need me." He searched her face, fear and admiration warring in his grey eyes. "You will stay by my side." "I will." They went out into the storm. The streets were chaos, water knee-deep in places, debris swirling in the current, lightning revealing overturned carts and frightened horses. Julian's carriage could not pass. They went on foot, he shielding her with his coat, she directing him through shortcuts she had learned from servants' gossip. They reached the warehouse district to find a nightmare. The old Rutland warehouse, used now for tenant storage, stood half-submerged. Families who lived in the upper floors had climbed to the roof, children crying, mothers clutching infants. The water rose relentlessly. Julian took command with the authority of a man born to it, organizing servants and neighbors into rescue chains, directing boats where they could reach. Clara worked beside him, wading into chest-deep water to help a grandmother with rheumatism, carrying a toddler to safety, calming panicked mothers with steady words. Hours blurred. By dawn, the rain had eased, but the warehouse was lost, lower floors ruined, possessions destroyed. All residents were safe, sheltered in Rutland House's servants' quarters and stables. Clara and Julian were the last to leave. Exhausted, soaked, covered in mud, they stood on the warehouse steps watching the water recede. Julian's arm was around her waist, holding her upright. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "We were magnificent." He turned her to face him, his gray eyes dark with emotion. "I almost lost you tonight. You did not. I could have." His voice cracked. "When I saw you wade into that current to reach the child on the upper landing. I am here." She cupped his face. "I am safe." He pulled her against him, burying his face in her wet hair. "I cannot lose you," he whispered. "I thought I could live behind walls forever. I thought safety lay in not feeling. But tonight, watching you risk everything for strangers, I realized the truth." She pulled back to look at him. "What truth?" "That not feeling is not safety. It is death." Tears mixed with rain on his cheeks. "I have been dead for 15 years, Clara. Until you." Her heart ached. "Julian, I love you." The words tore from him. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I love your courage and your sharp mind and the way you challenge me to be better. I love the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love—" His voice broke. "I love everything about you. And I am done hiding from it." Clara felt tears spill over. "I love you too. I have loved you since you defended me when no one else would. Since you brought me Wollstonecraft and debated reform bills with genuine passion. Since you kissed me and changed everything." He kissed her then, in the gray dawn light, with the smell of wet stone and receding water around them. It was fierce and tender and full of promise. When they drew apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me tomorrow," he said. "Not out of duty or convenience. Marry me because I cannot live without you." "I will marry you tomorrow," she whispered. "And every day after." They returned to Rutland House as the sun rose, hand in hand, soaked and exhausted and radiant. The storm had passed. So had the last of Julian's walls. The wedding took place the next day in the small chapel at Rutland House, as planned, but everything felt different. Clara walked down the aisle on her brother's arm, her gown simple white silk, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders because Julian had asked to see it that way. He waited at the altar, tall and dark and no longer marble. When she reached him, he took her hands and smiled, the real rare smile that lit his gray eyes from within. The vows were traditional, but they meant them with every fiber of their beings. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Julian kissed her gently, reverently, in front of their small gathering of family and friends. Later, at the breakfast, the Dowager Duchess, Julian's grandmother, raised her glass with trembling hands. "To my grandson," she said, voice strong despite her age, "who has finally learned that love is not weakness, but strength. And to his bride, who taught him." Clara felt Julian's hand tighten around hers. That night, in the Duke's chambers, now theirs, Julian held her close. "No more walls," he whispered against her skin. "No more walls," she agreed. Outside, the city began to dry under summer sun. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds began the rest of their lives. Together. The return to London society after the wedding was meant to be triumphant. Julian had insisted on it. "We will not hide," he said the morning after the storm, as they stood together in the sunlit library of Rutland House, watching servants clear the last of the flood damage. "We will show them what happiness looks like." Clara had agreed, heart full of the love they had finally confessed. They returned to town in early autumn, taking up residence in the grand Rutland townhouse in Berkeley Square. The Ton, ever eager for fresh spectacle, received them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Invitations arrived, cautious at first, then in a flood. The Duke and Duchess of Rutland were the season's most intriguing couple. The Ice Duke thawed, the scandalous Bluestocking elevated. They attended every significant event, presenting a united front that grew more genuine with each passing day. Julian's devotion was no longer performance, it was simply truth. He touched her often, laughed at her wit in public, defended her with quiet ferocity when old whispers resurfaced. Clara bloomed under his love. She hosted salons where intelligent conversation replaced vapid gossip, championed causes her father had cared about, education for girls, relief for the poor. Julian supported her without reservation, his influence opening doors that had once slammed in her face. Langford's lies faded into embarrassed silence, until they did not. The resurgence began subtly. A whisper at Lady Castlereagh's musicale. Had anyone heard the latest about the Duchess's past? A knowing glance at the opera. One wondered if the Duke knew the full story of that Hertfordshire house party. A letter to Julian from an anonymous friend, hinting at proofs of Clara's indiscretion. Julian burned the letter without showing her. But Clara saw the tension return to his shoulders, the way his grey eyes darkened when certain names were mentioned. The final blow came at the Almack's assembly, the pinnacle of social acceptance, the place where vouchers were harder to obtain than royal favor. Clara had never been granted one in her unmarried days. Now, as Duchess, she entered on Julian's arm to a rustle of silk and speculation. They had barely greeted their hostess when Langford appeared. He was thinner, his golden hair dulled, his eyes fever-bright with desperation. Rumor had it his debts had mounted, his credit exhausted. This was his last stand. "Your Grace, Duchess." He bowed with exaggerated courtesy. "What a pleasure to see you both so content." Julian's arm tightened around Clara's waist. "Lord Langford, I had heard you were the picture of marital bliss." Langford's smile was sharp, though I confess I was surprised. After our little adventure in Hertfordshire, I had thought Miss Whitmore, forgive me, Your Grace, might prove rather more adventurous in her tastes. The assembly room hushed. Clara felt every eye turned toward them. Julian's voice was deadly quiet. "You will apologize to my wife." "Will I?" Langford's laugh was high, almost manic. "For speaking the truth? Come now, Rutland. Everyone knows what happened. She was quite willing until we were interrupted. Perhaps she has convinced you otherwise, but—" Julian stepped forward, his face pale with fury. Clara caught his arm. "No." He looked down at her, eyes blazing. "Clara, not like this. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button now before this escalates." She turned to Langford, chin high. "You are a liar, my lord. Nothing happened in Hertfordshire beyond your unwanted advances and my immediate rejection. You have spent months spreading falsehoods because you cannot bear that rejection." Langford's face twisted. "And you have spent months hiding behind the Duke's title. But titles cannot change facts." "Facts." Clara's voice rang clear across the room. "The fact is that you are a desperate man facing ruin, willing to destroy an innocent woman to salvage your pride." Gasps rippled. Langford stepped closer, voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Careful, Duchess. Some facts are easier to prove than others. I have witnesses." "You have paid liars." Julian's voice cut through like a blade. "And I have had enough." He turned to face the room fully, keeping Clara close. "Lord Langford has spread vicious falsehoods about my wife since the day she rejected his advances. I will no longer tolerate it. Any person who repeats his lies will answer to me, personally." The silence was absolute. Then Lady Jersey, the most powerful of Almac's patronesses, stepped forward. "Lord Langford," she said coolly, "your voucher has been revoked. Permanently." Langford's face went white. "You cannot." "We most certainly can." Lady Castlereagh appeared at Lady Jersey's side. "Almack's has standards. You no longer meet them." The assembly watched as Langford was escorted out, his social death as public as his accusations had been. When the doors closed behind him, the room remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then the Duchess of Devonshire raised her glass. "To the Duke and Duchess of Rutland," she called. "May their happiness silence all doubters." Cheers erupted. Clara felt Julian's arm tremble around her. She looked up at him. "It is over," she whispered. He pulled her close, heedless of the watching crowd. "It is over," he agreed, voice rough with emotion. "And we have won." Later, in the carriage home, he held her as though she might vanish. "I should have ended him months ago," he said against her hair. "You ended him tonight." She cupped his face. "With truth, not violence. With love, not vengeance." He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of gratitude. When they reached Rutland House, he carried her up the stairs to their chambers, dismissing the maids with a look. In the firelight, he undressed her slowly, reverently. "I almost lost you," he whispered against her skin. "You never had me to lose." She arched into his touch. "I was always yours." He made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, whispering promises against her throat. No more walls. No more fear. Only us. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Clara felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Langford was destroyed, socially, financially, irrevocably. Society had chosen them. And Julian, her Julian, had chosen her, fully, completely, without reservation. The final stand was won. The future was theirs. 8 years later, autumn 1826. The leaves at Rutland Park had turned to fire. Scarlet oaks, golden beeches, copper birches blazing against a sky of perfect blue. From the terrace, Clara watched 4 small figures race across the lawn in pursuit of a laughing spaniel, their shrieks of delight carrying on the crisp air. Julian Alexander, 7 years old, heir to the dukedom, with his father's grey eyes and his mother's auburn curls, led the charge with solemn determination. The twins, Margaret and Beatrice, 5 years old, dark-haired like Julian, and already showing signs of their mother's sharp wit, followed in a tangle of petticoats and giggles. Little Henry, barely 3, toddled behind on sturdy legs, shouting commands no one understood but everyone obeyed. Clara's hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly. Another child, due in spring. She smiled at the thought. Julian's arms came around her from behind, his chin settling on her shoulder. "Plotting escape?" he murmured. "With this brood? Impossible." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You look happy." "I am happy." She turned in his arms to face him. Impossibly, ridiculously happy. His grey eyes, once so guarded, were soft with the same wonder that still caught her breath after 8 years. "As am I." He had changed so completely that those who had known the Ice Duke struggled to recognize him. The severe lines of his face had softened with laughter. The marble composure had given way to easy warmth. He teased the children mercilessly, debated politics with Clara late into the night, and kissed her in full view of servants who had long since ceased pretending not to notice. Society had dubbed them the most devoted couple of their generation. Clara still found it miraculous. Julian's grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, had passed peacefully 2 years earlier, surrounded by great-grandchildren and the family she had prayed for. Her last words to Clara had been typically direct: "You saved him, child. Do not let him forget it." Clara had not. Langford had fled to the continent after his disgrace at Almack's, his debts and scandals finally catching him. No one spoke his name any more. Clara's mother visited twice a year, her criticism tempered by genuine pride in her daughter's position and grandchildren. Clara's brother managed the family estates with competence, if not brilliance. Life had settled into a rhythm of joy and purpose Clara had never dared imagine. Julian's hand covered hers on her belly. "Another hellion," he said softly. "Poor governess." Or another blue-stocking to terrorize the ton. He laughed, the full, unguarded sound that still made her heart flutter. "God help us all." The children spotted them and came racing up the terrace steps, spaniel in tow. "Mama, Papa, Henry found a frog." Again. Julian knelt to catch his youngest son as he launched himself forward. "Did you bring it inside this time?" Henry's eyes widened in innocent outrage. "No." The twins exchanged guilty glances. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Margaret? Beatrice?" "It followed us," Margaret said solemnly. "On its own legs," Beatrice added. Julian met Clara's eyes over their heads, his expression one of mock despair. "We are doomed." Clara laughed, pulling the twins close. "Doomed and delighted." Later, after baths and stories and the chaos of bedtime, Clara and Julian stood at the nursery window watching the children sleep. Julian's arm was around her waist, his hand splayed protectively over her belly. "I never thought this would be my life," he said quietly. "Nor I." He turned her to face him. "You gave me everything I was too afraid to want. And you gave me everything I never dared hope for." He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of 8 years of love and trust and shared joy. Outside, autumn leaves drifted across the moonlit lawn. Inside, the Duke and Duchess of Rutland held each other in the quiet nursery, surrounded by the soft breathing of their children and the promise of the one to come. The Ice Duke was gone forever. In his place stood Julian, husband, father, man wholly and irrevocably in love. Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. 8 years ago, a kiss had changed everything. It had been the beginning of their ever after, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dreamed possible.